I made the Among Us crewmates and imposters in Minecraft. This new mod lets you spawn all of the coloured crewmates from Among Us and also the imposters which lurk in their midst. This is a really interesting mod which I set the goal for myself to create in a really short period of time. It's available now for all channel members. If you want to consider supporting the channel and get all my mods and join the server, click on the join button below. Let's begin. So first we're going to create a brand new project for Minecraft Forge 1.16.5 and I decided to call this Among Us Crewmates. I'm not sure if there's any other mods with the same name, but it sounded pretty fitting. The main reason for this isn't going to be an advanced mod. This is a mod which I wanted to create as a challenge for this video, so we're just mainly going to include the crewmates and the imposters, and right now that's just the end goal of the mod. In the future, if people enjoy this, I might add some brand new features, so feel free to leave ideas in the comments down below or tell me what you thought of the mod when you test it out. As with all of these mods, the next step is to fire up Blockbench, which is the modeling software which I use to create all of the models for all of my Minecraft mobs, all of my blocks, and any items in my mods that need 3D models. Blockbench is perfect because it's a really easy to use modeling tool, and so far it's personally been the easiest for me to use out of all of the different modeling tools. Now obviously this process is sped up to make it a little bit more interesting to watch, but as you can see I just started off with a zombie model and I just decreased it in size and added a few extra cubes and faces to add a bit more shape to the character. I'm creating the first Among Us crewmate right here, and I'm just going to change the pivot points of all the limbs so they match the new locations and sizes, so when it actually walks it will just look normal and perform like a normal mob. Now we're going for basics here, we're not going for a lot of detail because if you didn't realize, Among Us is a 2D game, so all of the characters are not supposed to be 3D anyway, so they would appear simple like this. So the next step after actually creating the physical model and appearance of what the mob will look like is you have to create the texture. The lucky reason why I use Blockbench is you can actually create the textures directly in the same program as the models, and you can visually see what they look like as you paint on the model. This is perfect, and this is the reason why I use Blockbench. So right here I'm just painting on the crewmate. Now you can see I'm just using very basic colors here, just grey for the visor and red for the body. The reason why I didn't add lots of different shades of colors or detail is because I want to easily make this skin recolorable later, so all I have to do is just use the fill tool and change the color red to all of the different colored crewmates. This is just so I don't have to spend hours creating constant skins for the other characters later. So I made myself a folder to save all of the materials in, and I saved the new crewmate red color texture in there and also the crewmate Java model. Next up, I decided making a few iterations and changes to the current model to make it appear like an imposter. Now, I'd already set up the pivot point, so it was easy for me to rotate all of the limbs and for them to stay in the right place, so all I had to do was just add some basic posing to the model. Now, in Among Us, you can't really see the imposter with a weapon drawn unless they just go behind the player and eliminate them, and even still, you don't really see it unless you're the actual person being eliminated, or if you see the imposter take out the other person. So, what I decided to do is kind of put my own twist on this, and even though it doesn't appear this way in Among Us, I decided to make the imposter characters in my Among Us crewmates mod have an arched arm which is stretched out behind next to the heads, and they're holding a knife item. So this just kind of distinguishes them from the normal crewmates. Now this makes it obvious when you spawn them which ones are imposters and which ones are crewmates. Maybe looking back on it right now, maybe if I do update this mod in the future, I might change it so by default the imposter imposters will appear like crewmates, and then when something happens in the game, they'll just change into this model where they have the weapons drawn and then they'll attack. I'll probably add some more complex AI and behavior to the mobs in the future, but I wanted to make it so you could easily tell who's imposter and who's a crewmate. This is a really basic model, I just wanted to make it pretty obvious which characters were who. I messed around with a few different rotations and poses of the arm until I was happy with where it was, and I decided to export the model as a new imposter model. Then the next thing was to paint this new model, because I realized now that I added the knife to the model, it was going to need a completely different texture, which was probably just going to look exactly the same, but I needed more space in the texture file to actually fit the colors of the knife, because if I record the knife in the current texture, it would just replace colors in different areas of the model. So I kind of just went round and copied the colors, but this time I made the imposter green, and I started coloring the different shades of grey around the knife to make the weapon a bit more distinguished. This didn't take too long, and as you can see, the turnout is still really basic, but we're still going for that simple cartoon look right now. As you can see, now the knife has some colours and the imposter looks a bit more imposing, so let's just save all this. Then we can import all of our resources which we just created, so we'll import both of the skins, and we'll go through and import both of the separate Java models, both for the crewmate and for the imposter, and we'll make sure that we assign the right animations to all of the limb pieces. I'll also go ahead and create a custom creative tab in the inventory, so when we go in there we can easily see all the mobs and items displayed in one tab, so we can easily find them. So now that we've created our model and imported the texture model, let's create our first crewmate entity. So we're going to assign the red texture and the Java model we just made and give it some really basic attributes. This mob isn't going to be complex, but we're going to have to add a few different AI tasks to make it unique. So we're going to make it a basic passive mob which doesn't attack anything, and when it gets attacked it will panic and run away. I'll also give it a few different basic villager tasks. For an example, we'll make it follow mobs of the same type, we'll make it move indoors when possible, and give the ability to open and close doors. Next up, we're going to duplicate the crewmate into a second mob, and this is going to be what we're going to use as the base for the imposter. This is just so we can make it really quickly and change just a few different AI pieces. Now, we're going to make the imposter target the crewmate, so when you spawn them both, the imposter will immediately go and attack the crewmate. And we're going to make the imposter a little bit stronger than the crewmate. We're going to make him a little bit faster, just like the game properties which you can change in Among Us games, and we're going to switch up some of the AI tasks of this enemy to make him aggressive, not only towards the player but also aggressive towards the crewmates, and we're going to make him basically stalk the enemies and watch them as long as he's in range and they're in his radius. So he's going to have some fairly complex AI here, and now we're ready for the first test. Now, I would personally say the first test was quite a success. Nothing was too perfect, but for a first run everything works really nicely. You can see the crewmate is walking as normal, and when he gets attacked he runs away, and the imposter looks really sinister as he kind of scuttles along the ground and lunges towards the crewmates. So the imposters do work as intended, and they are hostile, and they take down the crewmates in 2 or 3 strikes, so pretty quickly. Now, one thing that was bothering me was the fact that the knife colors weren't appearing in game, so I had to re-export and save the model, re-import it, do all the animations all over again, and change the texture, and we loaded up for a second test, and finally the knife actually appeared as grey instead of green like the rest of the skin. Now, the mobs perform the same at this point, but I was pretty happy with them. They do this weird thing where they go in for a knife lunge and then they run away and then they come back and strike again. It kind of makes it look sinister and really sneaky, so I decided to leave that there. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I would go through a few different changes because I wasn't sure if I wanted the imposter to have his arm moving, the arm that has the knife in, or in a different position, but I ended up finalizing this look of the mob. Now, remember how I explained earlier that I was making the textures for all of the mobs really simple and basic? Well, the next step is actually the reason why, and this is a really time-consuming step, which is a little bit boring, so I won't really bore you by showing you all of it. But basically, this in the background is completely sped up, so you can kind of get the idea of what I was doing. I was just duplicating the crewmate texture multiple times and then coloring them to all of the different colors inside Among Us. As you can see, I pretty much made every single color of crewmate in Among Us, and then what I do after doing all these textures is I duplicate all of the crewmate crewmate mobs and then assign a different color to them. Yeah, this took quite a long time to do, but it's definitely not the most time consuming thing because I'd have to do this later on a bigger scale, which you'll see. Now, I chose most of the colors to be crewmates, but I chose 2 or 3 of them at random to be the imposters. Let's skip ahead to testing all of the different colors in game. So upon the 3rd test, I was really happy with the turnout. As you can see, we've got a nice little creative tab here called Among Us Crewmates with all of the different colored mobs with spawn eggs for each of them corresponding to their color of the characters you can play in Among Us. So this is every single color of crewmate which is supported on the game, so I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. As you can see, like I said before, they do look very basic. Maybe in the future I might add a little bit more detail to the skins, but I'm still liking the clean cartoony look. And not only this, I've just shown you all of the crewmates, but there are 3 imposters, so I decided to make the standard dark green one, which we made before, and a new pink and a new black color to be all the imposters, because for some reason these are the colors which always seem to be the imposters when I used to play Among Us, and always the colors which used to just betray me and kill me, and then I'd be like, dude, what gives? Anyway, the only problem I had with this after I recolored all the skins is I realized using the fill bucket tool to change the color actually changed the color of the knife too. So now I have the problem that every single imposter doesn't have a colored knife, but luckily for me there's only 3 imposters, so I can just go back later and recolor those. But it looks pretty cool to have a pink and black knife right now. I had to make a few changes to the imposters because since there was now like 8 different crewmates, the imposters would only attack the first crewmate that we made, so I needed to copy and paste the AI tasks and add all the different crewmates to the target list so the imposters would take all of those out too. Now this took a little bit of a while to do and I didn't want to manually do this for all of the different imposter mobs, so what I did is I exported the AI setup once I completed this and I just copied it over to the other 2 imposters too to speed up the process. Next up, I wanted to add a little bit more personalization to the mod, so I got a texture off the internet of just a basic red Among Us crewmate and I copied it over and I resized it down into a really small resolution. As you can see, what I did is I went around with the eraser tool and I got rid of all of the white that went around it so it had a transparent background. Now you might be wondering, why on earth do I just have a random picture of a crewmate here? I already made the imposters. Well, this isn't actually for the mobs. This was so I could make a basic item which didn't do anything called the crewmate token and use this texture basically for this item. As you can see, I labeled it currently no function. This is because you need an item to use the item's texture as the creative tab picture. As you can see, I used this Among Us crewmate picture as the icon for our creative tab, so it wasn't a default Minecraft block. So test number 4 entailed us jumping in to test out our new tab. As you can see, everything looks so much more clean now that we have this custom icon on our creative tab. It looks like a more serious and professional mod. I'm really happy with how this turned out and it really fits into the Minecraft creative menu because we made the icon transparent. We do have a random item though in the inventory which we don't need, but unfortunately we just needed to create this to use the items icon for the creative tab. Now, unfortunately, this next step of the modding process, I actually did on my second monitor, so I have no footage of the modeling process. But basically, this was a last feature I decided to add to the mod before completing it. I basically decided to add that feature from Among Us, where when you kill a crewmate, it leaves behind a body and kind of like a half-severed torso with bones. I thought this would be really cool to recreate inside Minecraft, so I made a whole brand new model separate to the normal mob, which was a model just for the crewmate's body, and then I made an entire new texture for it, and I just made a new item which was a block and called it crewmate body and gave it a basic sound set and material set. This would basically be a completely separate block to the mob, where when you kill the mob it will actually place down this block so it looks like a torso. Now it doesn't really serve a purpose, it doesn't drop any items or really do anything, but it's really cool as kind of like a display piece which simulates the game a bit more. So I created a custom task inside the crewmate 1 procedure and I made it so when you kill the crewmate 1, it will drop down the crewmate's body. Let's test this. So the first test and basically the final test went really well. Now it wasn't perfect at all. There was a few slight glitches in there which sometimes happen, but for the most part you can see this actually looks really good. Like this appears just like it does in the game. I really was proud of this model and how everything appeared. Now as you can see, we're just testing this right now with red crewmates. We do have some problems with some colors which we're going to run into later, and also one issue was sometimes when I killed the crewmates it would leave behind 2 bodies. I'm not really sure why that glitch happened or how to fix it, but that was a little bit strange, but it didn't always happen. Now another glitch would be is wherever you defeat the mob, it will drop down the torso block in that position. So for an example, if you killed the mob when he was in midair, the torso would just be floating in midair because it has no gravity. I could probably fix that by giving the torso block gravity like sand so it falls down. The next problem would be to create a separate texture for every single torso piece, but this would require to export the model every single time that we wanted a new texture on it. This means we'd need a completely separate model for each colored torso of each crewmate and imposter. So this was going to take a long time, so I did this off camera without filming it. And this is the final result of the Among Us Crewmates mod. As you can see, I have all of the different crewmate bodies lined up there as blocks at the bottom of the creative tab, which you can all spawn. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of stress test the mod and test things out a little bit. As you can see, we have every single color of crewmate and imposter working, but we only have 3 imposters. Maybe I'll change this in the future and add an imposter variation of every single color of Among Us character. If you have any cool ideas, do make sure to leave them in the comment section below. I am open to suggestions, and if you are a channel member who's supporting the channel by clicking the join button, you do have access to this mod, so make sure to go ahead and download it because that will be available in the members area for you to play around with. As you can see, we're just going to spawn these guys. I kind of made this evil pit. I just dug down this deep stone pit and just placed all these guys inside, and then I just went ahead and just unleashed all of the imposters on them just with no remorse. You can see I'm just spawning all 3 imposters, and we're just going to let these guys loose, and they're just going to jump in the pit and absolutely eviscerate these guys. The reason why I did this so inhumanely is because I wanted to make sure that every single crewmate dropped the torso block when they get killed and everything was working basically as it should be. So let's just say that this mindless imposter rampage was just for testing purposes. But as you can see, all the bodies are the right color, all of the mobs leave behind their separate body blocks, and all of them work. Sometimes they spawn in not really the best of positions, but you can see in theory the mod works as it should do, and I'm really happy with it. Make sure to like the video and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.